Good morning, everyone. My name is Fiona Williamson, and I am a rising junior at Christendom College and a current intern at the Luce Center. It is my great privilege to introduce our first speaker today, Miss Mary Margaret Olohan. She serves on the Luce Center's advisory board and is a White House correspondent for the Daily Wire, where she stands at the intersection of politics, culture, and the pressing social issues shaping our world today. From early on in her career, her extraordinary courage to get in the middle of hostile women's marches, to bring the lies into the light, has set her apart from all other reporters and inspired many to get involved. Mary Margaret is also the author of the powerful book DeTrans, True Stories of Escaping the Gender Ideology Cult, a compelling work which features multiple interviews with detransitioners, giving voice of people who are often ignored or silenced by mainstream media. Before she joined the Daily Wire, Mary Margaret was a senior reporter at the Daily Signal and a social issues reporter at the Daily Caller News Foundation. While there, her reporting focused on the dignity of life, the protection of children's innocence, and women whose private spaces are compromised by the presence of trans-identifying men. She is a graduate of the Catholic University of America and the proud eldest daughter of an Irish Catholic family of 11 children, whom my family has known for many years. Please join me in welcoming Miss Mary Margaret Olohan.
Well, good morning, ladies. It's so wonderful to be here with you all. This is my favorite kind of event, to be with so many hardworking and inspired young women like you. So thank you so much for having me. And thank you, Fiona, for that introduction. We're big fans of the Williamsons. So like she shared, my name is Mary Margaret. I am a reporter. I cover Donald Trump's second administration right now, which is pretty cool. We weren't sure whether that would happen or not, and here we are. I am at the White House pretty much every day. But this is not what I've been doing for most of my career so far. And I think it's helpful for young ladies like you to know kind of how I got here, what I was doing before now, and to give you a little glimpse into what this kind of reporter life is like. And I'll definitely be taking questions at the end. So if at any point there's anything that you want more information on, please let me know, because I didn't have any big sisters, so I figured a lot of this out for myself, and I love to share it with other people to help them kind of get an understanding of how you can go down this path. So I was homeschooled when I was a younger girl. I'm from a big Irish Catholic family. We're very serious about our faith. And so early on, we talked a lot about the importance of standing up for your faith, being true to your faith, implementing it into your daily life. And so for that reason, we were really serious about homeschooling, because my mom was very aware of a lot of these different intricacies of what was going on in schools. So Jane Olohan, shout out, she was very prescient to a lot of the issues that we would be talking about maybe 20 years later. And so as I grew up, we were talking about the issues of life and culture issues and the importance of protecting marriage and different topics like that. And so these all stayed with me, and I care a lot about these issues going forward. And so when I entered college, I thought, okay, maybe I want to be a writer, maybe I want to be a teacher. I know I want to do something with young people, helping them to understand things better, because I'm a big sister, so I love young people. And my professors all told me, no, don't be an English professor. No one wants that anymore. You should be a teacher. And so I looked into this and I thought, I don't know, I'm not feeling called to this. And I took one journalism class at Catholic U, and my AP, my Associated Press professor said, you can't use any opinion, you can't use any adjectives. And I was an English major, so I thought, this is boring. I don't want to do this anymore. And when I graduated, I started working for Regnery Publishing, which is a conservative publishing company in Washington, D.C. I had interned for them in college, and so when I started working for them, I was promoting their books, trying to get their authors on television. And while I was there, this monumental political thing happened, which I don't know if you guys are all cognizant of or if you were paying attention at the time, but it was the Kavanaugh hearings, when Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh was accused of sexually assaulting a woman many years ago. So as a publicist, I was required to pay a lot of attention to the news, because we were pitching authors based on what was happening in the news, and we were trying to get them on television or op-eds. And so I watched this really closely, and I started noticing how crazy this news cycle was, where you have a Supreme Court justice who's accused of sexually assaulting someone. That's very serious. We should pay attention to it. But at the same time, none of these media outlets were verifying the things that they were publishing. And we had all these unnamed people claiming crazy things that were being quickly disproven, but then our media sources were not acknowledging that. And very soon I began to see that there was a very serious pattern of media outlets purposefully excluding information or pushing other narratives in order to stop this justice from getting to the court. And we now know that that was because they feared that he would help overturn Roe v. Wade, which, spoiler alert, he did. But at the time, everyone was very startled by all of this. And for the people who were paying attention, it became very clear that the media was playing an active role in trying to stop this justice from impacting the future of the court. And I was so bothered by how all this was playing out and so radicalized that I thought, okay, I don't want to react to the news anymore. I want to be part of the news. I want to be breaking news, and I want to be putting out stories that help people understand what's actually going on rather than having to search through the news and figure out what they can trust or not. And so I did what I would encourage all of you to do is I looked around and I found a woman that I admired. I found a woman that I thought, okay, she's doing a really good job at reporting. I want to be like her. And I asked her to get coffee. And just so you know, when you ask a woman to get coffee, especially if you reach out in a polite and personalized way, almost always they will say yes. If you find their email, you get their phone number or connection, women love to help other women unless they're not a nice person. And they're going to want to sit down with you and get coffee. So she did. And this girl was Amber Athey. Some of you guys might know her. She worked for the Daily Caller at the time. Actually, she's back there now. And we got coffee. We talked about the Daily Caller, and she recommended that I apply for the Daily Caller News Foundation Fellowship. And I did. I took a little leap of faith, and I got it. And this was a little bit of a scary thing for me to do. I didn't know anything about journalism. I really didn't know that much about the Daily Caller. I had no idea what I was getting into. And this fellowship that I did was a 2-year fellowship where at the beginning, they're very hard on you because they're teaching you, but you're also a journalist. So right away, you're allowed to send press inquiries, you're allowed to write stories, but your editors are going to be really, really hard on you. And after a little while, they get really hard on you. And if you make mistakes, your story gets spiked, it doesn't get to go up, and it's very serious. So I had many nights where, I'd be writing in my apartment at home and I'd be trying to fix something and I'd be crying because I was like, oh, it's a long day. I didn't do this right. And after a little while, all of a sudden I realized, oh, I can write really fast and I have good news judgment. And then my bosses started saying, okay, what do you want your beat to be? What do you want to write all the time? So a beat is, immigration or culture issues or medicine or health. And with my background and my interest in all these culture issues, I immediately said I would like to cover abortion because at the time, not many people were writing about this on the right. And you might see a lot of commentating about it, a lot of people talking about the importance of protecting the unborn, but there were no reporters who were saying, here's the reality of what's going on here. Here's what's actually in this bill, or here's what happened at this abortion clinic when these peaceful protesters were attacked by someone shouting demonic slurs. You didn't hear any of that because most legacy media is pro-abortion. And they get a lot of different messaging from these activist groups who tell them how to write about this stuff. And so as I began writing about abortion, and I was a very young reporter, all of a sudden, all these people started emailing me and saying, hey, would you please write about this? No one else is. Or, hey, would you like to come to this event? No one's covering it. And I very quickly began developing a beat there where I was this young reporter. I felt like I didn't know that much. But what I did know was what was true or what was false. And I could figure that out very quickly by asking questions, by asking people to comment, by including both sides, and writing my story accurately and quickly. And before I knew it, all of a sudden, I started getting a little bit of a following. I started getting people that would tell me, oh, I heard that you're the abortion reporter at the Daily Caller. And then I started getting into the gender space as well. And I was writing about gender issues and explicit sex education and all of these different issues touching on the innocence of children. And I began to really build this beat for myself. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, it was hard. I was working really hard. We talk a lot about work-life balance. I'm sure you hear it all the time. And I'm the first to say you should be practicing your faith and you should be taking care of yourself and exercising and eating well. But when you're a young woman and you don't have a family yet, there's no better time to hustle, in my firm opinion. If you care about your job and you want to be good at it, you should be hustling. And that means trying to be the best at what you're doing of everyone in your field. And that might sound a little dramatic, but for me, what it meant was anytime anything abortion related happened in the news, I was like, that's mine. Don't touch that story. And the Daily Caller was pretty aggressive. So what would happen is someone would send out a story and say, does anyone want to write this? So if you missed that story and someone else wrote it, well, that was your fault. So you had to be very up on your toes, ready to grab a story when it happened, or ready to make news when you were writing it yourself. And so that's what I was doing. I was really pushing myself on this culture beat. And as I began working hard and sharing my stories on Twitter without any opinion in them, just saying, here's what happened, or here's a quote from someone that I talked to, I began to grow this following. And I began to establish myself around here in DC as a culture issues reporter. And this was really important to me because I cared about these issues. And at the time, people weren't really talking about culture issues on Capitol Hill. This was a couple years ago when it just wasn't really cool for lawmakers to talk about this stuff. They like to talk about immigration or the economy. But when it came to pornographic books in schools or transgenderism, that was not cool. That was kind of embarrassing to talk about. That was weird kind of Christian vibes, and they didn't like it. And as a homeschooler, I was like, I know what you guys are doing. You think this isn't cool. And that's why you're not talking about it. Because I wasn't cool. And I'm glad that I was homeschooled, but we all know what that's like. And so, I was looking at these issues and thinking, how do I get people to talk about this? And what I realized was telling the real stories of people, real Americans who have dealt with these very crazy stories is the best way to help people understand what's going on. So you can say, men shouldn't be in women's sports, or it's bad for you to transition. But when you actually put a story in front of someone of a young girl who had a double mastectomy, had her breasts removed forever when she was 13 years old, and now she's saying, please help me, I deeply regret this, that's completely different. And that's helping people look her in the eye and have to look her in the eye and say, I still think that it's okay and that kids should be able to get this kind of thing done. But very few people lack the empathy to look at a real lived story and not feel very strong sympathy for the person that lived it. And so that's what I started doing. I started finding more and more stories of people who had lived real experiences. And when I left the Daily Caller and went to the Daily Signal here in DC, it used to be the news outlet of the Heritage Foundation, and now it's kind of heritage adjacent. Great place if any of you are thinking about becoming a reporter. I started telling more and more stories of Americans who had been impacted by the Biden administration's weaponization of the Department of Justice or the COVID practices. For example, one of my favorite videos that we ever did was we went to this bar called The Big Board. It's a burger place on 8th Street. You guys should go and support the owner because he's awesome. This owner refused to comply with DC's vaccine mandate. And so they came and they took his liquor license and they found any way they could to punish him for standing up to the city. So we went in there after they had taken his liquor license because we wanted to shine a light on him and support him for his bravery. And I sat down with him, and in this video, we chose to look him in the eye. So I wasn't in it, and we had the camera focusing right on him, so you're looking him in the eye. And he explained what had happened and why he was willing to stand up to DC and to all of these COVID hypocrites across the country and say, no, I will not discriminate against any of my fellow Americans, and here's why. And at the end, he, when we were getting ready for this interview, I noticed all these envelopes on the counter, and I said, what's this? And he said, this is mail that I'm getting from people all over the country who are thanking me for not complying with this mandate. And in one of them, this person had quoted Thomas Jefferson and praised him for standing up for his country. And so he started crying when he told me this, and I got weepy too, and I said, can you please read this on camera? And so it's one of the most powerful moments I think I've ever done as a reporter. Is this man who lost his livelihood, was punished by the city. He looks into the camera and he cries as he reads this letter from some random American in the Midwest who thanked him for standing up for his country, just like our founding fathers. And that's the power of what reporting is. We can tell these stories with so many people and help them understand what's going on all over the country, whether it's transgenderism, whether it's the effects of illegal immigration on these families who are their children are taken away from them by illegal crime, whether it's election interference, or all of these issues that we have to deal with. Telling the real stories of Americans helps people understand what's going on. And that's so important and so underappreciated in this day and age. And I especially think you young women and myself, as educated young women who are principled and care about our country and are women of faith, we have an obligation to be shining light on the truth in whatever way we can, whether that's using your social media or whether it's becoming a reporter who can look at a situation and be like, no, that's not true. I'm going to tell the truth about this and what's going on. And one of those instances is my book that I wrote about detransitioners. As Fiona mentioned, it's about young women, mostly young women, who tried to do the impossible to become a boy. Obviously, that's not possible. But as I started writing about this in around 2021, I noticed that all these legacy outlets were saying that you could become a boy or that you could become a girl, and they were calling it gender affirming care. And worse than that, they were saying no one regrets their gender transitions, which is a lie, and kind of a crazy lie, and also kind of an obvious lie if you think about it. Of course, someone's going to regret undergoing these very invasive procedures. And so I looked around and found people who were saying, help me, I really regret this, and no one's listening to me and taking me seriously. And I talked to them, I studied their stories, put them all in this book. And the hope was that when you read this, you're not going to walk away and say, yeah, we should be okaying gender transitions for kids in the name of empathy. The hope was you read this and you think there are real people that are affected by these policies, and they deserve much more respect and much more science over ideology, which is not what we have seen happen. And so, as I'm doing all these culture war issues, I realized probably the best place for me to be would be the Daily Wire, which is the home of some of the biggest culture wars in our country, in the world, actually, I would argue. And so I went to the Daily Wire last September. My boss, Brent, insisted to me that I should join and to move to Nashville. So I thought, what the heck, let's do it. I'm going to go to Nashville and go to Broadway. And my sisters were very excited that they would have somewhere to go crash when they went to Nashville as well. And I started working for the Daily Wire and writing culture war stories for them. And I loved it. I had so much fun. But right around Christmas last year, after Donald Trump won the election, my boss called me and said, hey, I think we want you to cover the White House. And this had never occurred to me. In fact, I think I had told people in the past I would never do that because I thought that sounds stressful and scary. And, I love my culture beat. But I thought about it and prayed about it. And my family was like, please move back. We miss you. And so I decided it was what God wanted me to do. And I came back. And what I've been doing every day, pretty much every day, is I get dressed up. You got to look good every day because you might be on camera or you might be doing an interview. I go to the White House. I scan in through the Secret Service. And then I go into the briefing room, or I go into the basement, or I go to the White House Pebble Beach where you do media hits. And it's a very surreal experience. It's been stressful. It's been scary, but it's been really neat. I have access to the President of the United States when I get to go into the Oval Office and ask him questions. We have some strategies there. You got to wear bright colors. You got to be noticeable and peppy and smiling so that you can get the president's attention. And then in the briefings, I'm sure many of you have seen these on TV. There's all these seats for the legacy reporters, and they sit in the middle, and they have their seats that they've had for many years. And us lesser media, who are not legacy reporters, stand in the aisles. And you might see me. I'll usually stand on the left, and I raise my hand and try to get a question from Caroline Levitt. And when we do, we ask about things that our audience cares about, or questions that we know that the legacy media isn't going to ask. And one good example of this is the violence that we've been seeing against ICE agents who are doing their job. They're following the president's directives. They're trying to arrest illegals who have been convicted of violent crime. And what we're seeing all over the country lately, and I'm sure you all have heard about this, is ICE is being targeted for doing their jobs. There's people doxing their addresses. There's people who are making apps to tell people where ICE is. That's called ICE Block, and that's something I asked about in a recent briefing. And so we've been focusing on this and asking Caroline Levitt and the White House questions about this violence against ICE because none of the other media are very interested in this. They're more interested in finding ways to prove that Donald Trump did something wrong because they only consider scoops and exclusives to be legitimate or important if they're telling you something bad about the president. And that's important for us to realize is that a lot of our legacy media only thinks of news as good if it's bad for this administration. And that's not the way media is supposed to be. Reporters are supposed to care about the truth. They're supposed to care about our country. But if they're going to be biased, they should be open about it. And they should be open about who they work for. The Daily Wire is a conservative news outlet. We care about conservative issues, but we also care about our Americans, and we're not deceptive about what we're doing. The Washington Post, for example, will tell you that democracy dies in darkness, but all their reporters are pro-abortion and pretend to be unbiased and not care, and they're supporting transitioning. They're very anti-Trump, and they will tell you up and down that they are unbiased reporters. That's not fair to you, that's not fair to Americans, and that's not how it's supposed to be. So in the White House now, we're spending a lot of our time trying to get real answers from the administration, trying to ask about these issues that our audience cares about, that you guys might care about. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm loving it. I'm having a lot of fun. And we'll see what I do next. Who knows? But the thing about all of this is that there's so much ability as a journalist to ask these questions of people in power. I would never have thought that me, Mary Margaret, a former homeschool girl, would be able to ask the most powerful man in the world questions about what's going on in the world, that I would be able to ask the most powerful man in the world questions about issues that are really important to people like me. We're able to ask about violence against ICE, but we're also able to ask about transgender issues and abortion, Epstein, anything that we want. And that's really powerful and very cool to be a part of. But it takes work to get there. And so I think that, I want to give you guys a couple tips on how in your professional life you can succeed as a young woman who is a woman of principle and of faith and wants to work hard. And I would say the number one thing is, no matter what religion you are, whether you're Catholic, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, whatever, prioritize your faith. There has never been a moment in my career that I suffered for prioritizing my faith. And there's been many times where I've gone to Mass during lunch and thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to miss out on this story because of this, or I'm not going to get this scoop because of this. And I can tell you, in all honesty, God has never punished me for going to Mass during lunch. I always, if I prioritize my prayer life or go to Mass, I always have a better day. Prioritize your health as well. Fitness is so important. I think for reporters especially, it's so easy to focus on your work instead of taking care of yourself. But those things need to be prioritized too. And then especially in Washington, I would encourage you, find women of substance to be friends with. This is so important. Don't jump for the girls that are telling you, that are immediately trying to be intimate and immediately sharing things and immediately acting as though they know you better than anyone else. Have slow and steady friendships where you find women of faith who are serious about their lives, serious about their principles, and they want to be your friend because they respect you and you respect them. It's very hard to find good friends around here, but once you do, they're really, really great people, and it's so important for you to have. I would also encourage you hear a lot of conflicting messaging around here. Thank you. Do prioritize relationships. Do prioritize your future spouse. There's a lot of confusion, I think, these days in whether we should be prioritizing marriage or our career. And I would encourage you, as I'm sure you're hearing from so many other women at this conference, to prioritize both. Rachel Campos-Duffy spoke at a Clare Boothe Luce conference that I was at many, many moons ago. And she told everyone at that conference, prioritize finding your husband and God will take care of the rest. So don't put your marriage or your relationship on hold for a career. Do both of them together. And I would argue too, put yourself in a position where you can someday be at home and help your children if you need to do that. For me as a writer, I think it's so exciting that someday, if God willing, I have children and a family, I'll be able to write at home and take care of them if I want to. Think about the future as a woman of substance rather than someone that's obsessed with career and trying to figure out how to be a career woman. Look at it with nuance, and I think that this will help all of us better to build a more flourishing society. And I can take many more questions about all of this, but I would just conclude saying reporting is so important. We need more reporters. We need more young women who are serious people of principle, who are interested in digging up the truth, in investigating all of these things going on in our country, whether it's culture wars or more drier issues or medicine or health. All of these things are so important for us to be digging into. And there are so many avenues that you can explore and that you can be revealing breaking news on. And I can share more about some of these topics that I've broken news on. There's all different spheres, but I will say, I think that we have a place in this sphere. It's very important for us. And I believe that the truth will set you free. And that's what our job here is. So with that, I would love to take any questions that you all might have. And we can veer to any part of that. I know that was a lot, but I love talking to you all about it.
Thank you so much. That was so inspirational. I just wanted to say, when you first started your career, you said you were looking for a role model, a young woman to look up to, and how the roles have changed. And you're really an inspiration for us, so thank you.
That's so sweet.
We will have questions now, so please line up behind me and state your name, your school, and an organization if you're a part of one.
Hi, my name's Anastasia, and I'm one of the Luce interns here this summer, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here today. I wanted to ask if you have any advice on how to discern which career is going to both suit your interests and be a good fit for applying your skills.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and thank you for the question. I struggled with this when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do because, first of all, there's so much pressure placed on us when we're in college to know what we're supposed to do and to know, to be able to tell the whole world, oh, I got this job, junior year of college, and I'm about to go out into the world, and this is my identity. And I have a lot of sisters that have struggled with this as well. If you go to a really competitive school and all your friends around you are like, well, I have my job at Morgan Stanley lined up, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to be doing? So I get it. I know there's a lot of pressure there. And for me, what I found was I was an English major. I really cared about writing and really cared about reading. I really didn't like college until my junior year when I got this really good Shakespeare professor who was really intelligent, really witty, and he cared about me as a student. And all of a sudden I realized college is fun. I can succeed. I'm smarter than I thought. I'm a good writer. And this professor really invested in me, and I was so grateful for that. And at that point in time, I think I started to relax and realize I have skills. I know I have skills and I'm good at what I do. So I should just be looking for jobs that match that. And so for me, going to Regnery Publishing, that was a place where I knew that my skills would be of use. And it gave me a little time to think about, what do I want to do? Where do I want to go? And that's something I think Gen Z feels a lot of pressure for, is to be your dream right away. You do not need to be your dream right away. In fact, no one can do that unless you're some superstar. You should go to a job right out of college where you're excited to work there, you're going to make some money, but you're also going to have a resting place to grow as an adult, to pay your rent for the first time, and to figure out what you're supposed to do next. And that's what I tell all my sisters and our friends is, your dream job will not happen right away. So relax. You can work towards it. And if it does happen right away, I'm so happy for you, but that's not normal. So I'm so close to this. But I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Hello, my name is Madeline Zadnik, and I go to the University of Dallas in Texas.
Awesome.
I was wondering if there were any specific tools or tricks or techniques that you use in your writing to try to keep it as unbiased and truthful as possible.
That's a great question. And actually, my two brothers go to the University of Dallas. So if you see any redheads on campus, you should say hi. So I will say, as a reporter, this was hard for me to understand right away because I was, like I said, an English major. And obviously, academic writing is a lot more flowery, use a lot of adjectives. It can sound a little pretentious sometimes. That's just kind of the nature of it. Reporting is really much more sparse. You don't use a ton of descriptive words unless you get to a point in your career where you know you're getting the information from someone who's telling it to you, and so you do need to be descriptive and to offer a little bit of background in a more descriptive way that is still factual and accurate. And so what I would recommend is stick to the facts of what's happening, report both sides, get comment from both sides, and if you can't get it from both sides, you note that the one side didn't respond to a request for comment. So for example, I'll give you a brief example. In 2019, I heard from this pastor in California who told me that the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, was instructing teachers in California how to help little girls get abortions without their parents knowing as part of their sex education. And this was a scary story for me to write because at the time, no one was really talking about it. It was very wild and people thought it was fake. And so I had to really dig in, get the facts about all of this, reach out to both sides and report the story. And if you're outlandish about this, no one's going to believe it. So I think my lead, the very first sentence of my story, said something along the lines of, the American Civil Liberties Union was caught teaching teachers how to help girls get abortions without parental consent, according to documents obtained by the Daily Caller. Very factual, very specific, but you're still going to read that lead and think, what on earth is happening? And you're going to want to know more. And that's the crazy thing about some of these culture stories is you can be as prosy and boring as possible, and people are still going to be interested because of what's going on. So you don't even need to be that talented of a writer to succeed in this area because there's so much going on. So I would just recommend sticking to the facts of what you're reading or writing, sharing the most important information first. And let's say you're writing about an abortion story and you want to include both sides. Maybe you reach out to the March for Life for comment, and then you reach out to Planned Parenthood for comment. I can almost guarantee you Planned Parenthood will not answer, but what you put in your story is Planned Parenthood did not immediately respond to a request for comment. And when I was younger and writing on this abortion beat, I think I reached out to them maybe 60 times before they ever answered me. I started keeping count because I thought it was funny. And ultimately, they did answer me. I think it was an accident. And I was able to say Planned Parenthood spokesman so-and-so said XYZ. And so that's the balance that you need for these stories. And it helps make your reporting much more believable at the end of the day. People do want to hear from both sides and know what's going on. So that's just a couple tips.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hi, my name is Grace. I'm a student at the University of Arizona, and I work for Congressman Kevin Kiley from California. My question actually has to do with immigration. So as a Catholic myself, the Lord teaches us, to take care of the poor and marginalized, but also as the United States of America, we're also called to protect our borders. So what is your, personal opinion, and obviously as a reporter, what is your opinion on this? Because as a Catholic, I'm often called about on this topic.
This is a very good question. It's a very sensitive question. I think even, I want to say yesterday or 2 days ago, the Bishop of San Bernardino in California put out a statement dispensing his diocese from going to Mass if they believe that they might be included in an ICE raid. So effectively telling any illegals in his diocese, you don't have to go to Mass anymore. Unfortunately, Catholicism really has become intertwined with politics in this area, and I would argue that bishop shouldn't have done that, and that was really inserting himself in the political scene in a way that he shouldn't have. But at the end of the day, the Catholic Church, contrary to what you'll hear from the left, does not support open borders. The Catholic Church does not support breaking the law. What the Catholic Church supports is harboring refugees who are in dire need, who need safety. And obviously, popes along the way have said many times, actually, that it's good to support immigration if it doesn't hurt your country. And so as a Catholic, when I look at this issue, I think, okay, there's a nuanced approach to this. Every human being should be treated with dignity and respect, but we also need to honor the laws of our country. And as a reporter, when I'm covering this, I think it's important to include that context. When, a left-leaning bishop says something aggressive, well, I think it's important to include Catholic Church teaching on this issue because there's a lot of people who get confused. So obviously it's an issue that's very nuanced, and like I said, you need to treat every person with dignity and respect, but you look at these angel moms, you hear them crying as they talk about how their children were murdered by these illegals in such gruesome and horrible ways. You have to remember that we need to protect our children, we need to protect our country, and there's some very common sense laws that are being enforced, and there's nothing wrong with that. So it is a really dicey topic, though, and obviously it needs to be handled with care. And I think some of these memes that we see a lot, even some of these videos of illegals being deported, can cause people to err on the wrong side of this topic because of empathy, and that's something that we've seen for years as I think left-leaning Catholics struggling with empathy over reason and facts. So all of those things are at play here, and I would just encourage you as you approach the conversation to be very even-keeled and not get emotional and just stick to the basics of protecting our country, treating people with dignity and respect, and how both of those things can happen at the same time.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hi, good morning. My name is Natalie, and I just want to thank you for being here. I recently graduated from the University of California, Irvine, and I'm currently interning as a legislative intern for the House. And I think growing up and especially attending a school that really leans very liberal in a lot of different environments, I've personally struggled with trying to survive where I felt like I had to hide my own faith and my own beliefs. And I was wondering, have you ever faced, some sort of hate or some sort of strong opposition, and how you navigated and overcame that, especially when a lot of the legacy media can be so leftist and opposing to the truth that you're trying to put out.
That's a really good question. And, I've been blessed. I grew up in a really great Catholic homeschool community and then a private school for high school. So I've never really been surrounded by people who are antagonistic to our lifestyle or our faith. And it's a blessing. And I really respect people like you who have been in an environment like that and have to figure that out. I will say that when I was younger, I did expect that being open about who I was, homeschooled, Catholic, all of these things, serious about my faith, because there's a difference between being Catholic and practicing Catholic, I did expect to get backlash for that. And what I have found, and you might be surprised to hear this, is that the more open I am about who I am and what I stand for, the more people seem to respect me. And I think that's because in our day and age, so many people are afraid to stand up for who they are. They're afraid to explain to the world why they believe what they believe. And our culture desperately wants to have an identity. Our culture, all of these young people that you're surrounded with, they don't totally know who they are. They're trying to figure that out. And if you are a person of faith, you have morals, you have tradition. In the Catholic Church, I'll just say specifically, the Catholic Church has tradition, it has principles, it has history. And then, within my family, I feel like there's so much there as well. So the more open I am about who I am and what I love, I think it helps people understand who you are. And unless you're a really horrible person, they're going to like you better. So I would argue that, there's only been a few times in my career where my Catholicism was held against me. And one of those was early on when I was at the Daily Caller. I was writing a story about Joe Biden. The CNN fact checker called him a devout Catholic. And, this is a common descriptor for former President Joe Biden, who does go to Mass every Saturday night and does say the rosary. He is, someone who practices his faith. He's also the most pro-abortion president in the history of the United States and is personally responsible for the deaths of more babies than probably any other president can boast of. So there's a lot going on there that I would argue would make it so that is not an accurate representation of who the president is if you call him a devout Catholic. And so I sent a press inquiry to the head of CNN Communications, and I said, can you comment on your fact checker calling the president a devout Catholic? Why? What's the reasoning here? And the head of CNN Communications screenshotted my press inquiry, and he blacked out my name, but he left it so you could see my publication, and he tweeted it, and he said, this is gross. And so many people liked it, and everybody was liking it and retweeting it. And I was really new at the time, and I thought, oh my gosh, I don't think it's gross. I think that was a legitimate question. And it wasn't gross. It was a legitimate question, but I didn't really know, and I didn't have a ton of people around me at the time to say, no, you're right. That's a legitimate question. We should be asking these kinds of things. We shouldn't just be breathlessly describing the president of the United States as a devout Catholic, even though he's the most pro-abortion president in United States history. But in that instance, I just talked to the people in my life that I knew would support me. They were like, that was a legitimate question. You shouldn't be embarrassed about that. And I just walked it off. And I looked back on that the other day and I thought, good, I'm glad that happened. I'm glad that I was able to see in that small way that, yes, someone might push back on your faith. But at the end of the day, if you know what's real, then it doesn't matter. There's definitely other people who have been really mistreated for their faith. You can go all the way back to Roman times when they were throwing people in arenas with lions for being Christian or Catholic. But I think we're in a good space of time right now where standing up for your beliefs is respected, especially by people on the right. And sharing your faith in a kind way that helps everyone know that they're a human worthy of love and respect will go so far. So I would encourage you, don't be afraid to be who you are.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We have time for one more question.
Okay.
Hi, thank you for being here. I'm Joelle. I'm from Drake University in Iowa. So I just had a quick question to wrap this up. I just published my first book. It's called Conserving Truth, A Brief History of Western Conservatism. And I was just wondering if you had any recommendations on books or any sort of literature that really affirmed your conservative values and educated you on that kind of principles.
Well, first of all, congratulations. That's really hard, so nice work. I will say that a lot of my current convictions are rooted in my faith, first of all. So, I'm a Catholic first and foremost. I was really well educated in my faith growing up. But some books and some figures that I would recommend that you look into that have really informed me as an adult are Abigail Schreier's Irreversible Damage. I think that is important reading for every woman. It's about the transgender medical industry and how it's duped so many mothers and convinced so many girls that they are born in the wrong body, which is very wrong. Abigail Schreier has done amazing work, and I think she's a really, really powerful figure. But I would also recommend Molly Hemingway, who's a sort of mentor of mine. I really respect her. And she's an incredible journalist. She does really, really good work. And if you follow her work and read her books, she wrote one, Justice on Trial, which is on the Kavanaugh hearings, and it's really good. But I would also say J.D. Vance's book. Oh my goodness, I'm blanking on the name. Hillbilly Elegy, thank you. Really important book. It's about our vice president. It also reads kind of like a novel, and so I would really encourage you to read that. It's so informative about our vice president, but teaches you so much about our country and a lot of attitudes towards family these days that should be examined. I am also a reader of classical literature. I really encourage reading that to get out of the news bubble and help you to think better, to have better vocabulary, to be a better writer. We joke among my sisters that we're trying to be as literate as possible, so we try and read all these good books that are fiction, actually, but written by people who are really smart and who really inspire you, whether it's C.S. Lewis or Tolkien, Tolstoy. My family loves Dostoevsky, but that's a little more out there. All of these books are so good for you to help you be a better reader and writer and thinker, especially, guys, if you're watching Reels or if you're watching TikToks. Those are making you stupider. And I know we all do it, so I'm not going to say don't do it. But if you're doing that, you need to be reading too, because you need to maintain your brain energy and you need to be able to think at the same time. So balance it all. I would highly recommend.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, thank you all so much for having me. You guys are the sweetest, and I love being here with you.